I'm Nazir Afzal, and I'm here for 5 Live at the Roshni community event involving young people to discuss child sexual abuse and radicalisation here in Glasgow, but also nationally. We're very fortunate that Rehan Raza, who is one of the young people that is here today, is able to share some of his story. Now, Rehan, as I understand it, you were training and being educated in Egypt and Syria in the mid-2000s.
Yes, I studied in Pakistan from 2001 to 2003 at Minhaj University, and then I went for my further studies to Damascus in Syria. I did 4 years of studies there under some of the world's renowned scholars, and then I travelled to Egypt to receive my license, Ijaza, as it's known in the Islamic world.
All of that was pre what they call the Spring Revolution, isn't it? So at that time you had dictators in Syria, you had dictators in Egypt. When you were studying, did anybody suggest to you that there was a different path you should take?
Well, while I was in Syria in 2005, and I can always remember that moment when I was approached by a few individuals, and by their accent I could tell they were from, from London. First they approached me, asked me where I'm from, what am I doing here, and I always told them that I'm here to study, and they asked my background. After that, they started slowly getting into political aspects of what's happening in Iraq, because obviously the war had started. And they started asking me, what do you think we should be doing as Muslims? My response initially was that we can't do anything in terms of because what they wanted more towards actually traveling to Iraq, because they started saying that emotionally try to draw me into their ideology. But because I had a firm understanding of Islamic teachings by studying in Minhaj University and then obviously in Syria under some scholars, I understood that this path was actually wrong, because Islam does not allow us to actually go and fight for these type of causes, because it creates more division within the community, and it gives a bad name to Islam. But whereas Islam is based upon peace, love and harmony.
Just on that point where they were trying to persuade you, what were the messages they were trying to deliver to you that would encourage you, or in their view encourage you to join them?
Well, some of the things they were quoting were verses of the Quran, which were obviously out of context because I had studied those verses. Some of the traditions they were trying to quote, and some of the political views of some extreme scholars that have lived in the past. For example, Sayyid Qutb and Rashid Rida, and these kind of scholars, there were some scholars that were very extreme in their views. Abdul Wahhab, who is the Wahhabi leader, who actually laid down the foundations of the Wahhabi ideology, they actually quoted some of his stuff, saying that governments that are functioning, even in Pakistan and even Muslim countries, that they are disbelievers. And they were quoting verses like, the one who does not rule with the rule of God, he's a disbeliever. But whereas those verses are not applicable at these points.
So your good fortune was that you had studied Islam and you knew the Quran, and so you were able to see that what they were doing was taking things totally out of context in order to, in effect, lie to you about what they considered your role should be.
Yes, they were trying to actually emotionally, you could say, draw me into these ill ideologies that they were carrying. And once when I actually started speaking to them, and it turned into more of a debate then.
Rehan, they met their match with you because you understood. Now, the problem we have today is that there are millions of young people that don't have your understanding of Islam, don't have your understanding of the Quran. What do we do about ensuring that they get the kinds of information that you clearly had?
Well, one of the perceptions the young Muslims have, and this is when I speak to a lot of young Muslims, is that there are a lot of double standards shown in the media, negative media portrayal. And also whenever an issue arises regarding Islam or any issue that is related to Muslims, people who do not have an understanding of Islam, they are brought on TV or radio, and they're given the opportunity to actually further create misunderstanding and misrepresent Islam.
So we often hear the usual suspects, whether it's the media or any other part, they go to the same people who have their own distorted view, and they simply compound the perception that Islam is some kind of warmongering tradition. Your voice and the voices of the many people millions of people who don't think that way rarely get heard.
I would say not millions but billions, because a billion, because it's almost 1.2 billion people, Muslims around the world, and not every single one, as it's claimed, they are painted with the same brush. Because if you had 1.2 or 1.3 million terrorists around the world, I don't think so. It will be very easy to live around here.
That's Rehan Ahmed Raza. He's a young scholar, as you heard. David Cameron has been stressing his determination to defeat what he calls a poisonous extremist ideology. This new counter-extremism bill is likely to include new immigration rules, powers to close down premises used by extremists, and extremist disruption orders. Some people say this all infringes free speech. Others, of course, that those losses are well worth the price. In the second part of his package for this programme, we're going to talk to some guests about this in a moment. I wanted to hear what else Rehan said to Nazir Afzal, in particular about how young people who had been radicalised should be dealt with.
What I personally believe is that anyone who is radicalised, he's a victim. So we should try to mentor that person. Just as people, there are programs even in the UK and in other parts of Europe, where people who are murderers, who are drug addicts, or even extremists, they are being mentored by the people to de-indoctrinate them, to deconstruct their previous beliefs and re-educate them so that they become more tolerant towards the society.
I've made that point too, that with drug addiction, for example, there are two approaches we can take. One is we can criminalise somebody and take them down the justice system, or secondly, we can treat their addiction. And that ultimately is the best answer, because that prevents it happening again in the future. And that's what we don't do around radicalisation. We don't treat them, as you say, as victims. Those who are groomed into becoming radicals or are shown the dark side and tempted down that route aren't given treatment, aren't given support to help them. We tend to want to go down one route, which is the policing route.
Yes, and I think that if this route is adopted of actually mentoring young people and getting the right people to mentor them, because people who are equipped with sufficient Islamic knowledge to actually address those issues and to teach them the true values of the Quran and the teachings of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, I think, yes, we will be able to address these issues. And another point which I want to make here, and I think is very, very important, especially when I speak to young people, and I've always witnessed this myself, that both extremism and Islamophobia breed on each other. And in order to address the issue of extremism, we should simultaneously address the issue of extremism and Islamophobia. Only then will we be able to overcome this element of extremism.
Where people feel there's a grievance, or feel they have a grievance, they look to somebody to blame. Why is it that young people, so many young people, are fleeing off to Syria, to Iraq, because they think that's the way for them to go?
I think there can be a number of reasons. One is that the injustice they see and the double standards shown by the governments as well. For example, what we witnessed last year in Gaza, over 2,500 people were killed, but there was criminal silence from the international community. And this is a tool that is used by the extremists to say it's them against us. So therefore, what we urge the governments to do is to resolve the issues in a democratic and constitutional way under the Charter of the UN, because UN Charter recognises the human rights, right to freedom, right to property, right to live, right to move freely. So whereas when Muslims in their countries are deprived of this, and young people see that, the extremists use this as a tool to radicalise the young children.
And in terms of providing solutions, you've indicated that one of them is having counter-narrative, is having people as skilled as you are to explain what Islamic faith really says. Another is to a justice solution, to deal with the perpetrators, to close off the online portals, etc. But if you're a young person at the age of 14 and you are receiving these messages, is there more that we can do?
I think the best way forward is to actually educate at grassroots levels. Because what I see that events do take place. Like I've done events at a national level, at a Glasgow level, but the question is, do we get the right people coming to the events? And what I've seen in this conference is the young people are coming from age of 14, 15, 16, very young people who will be outspoken, who will talk about their, if they have any grievance. And if we identify their grievances, then obviously we can work with them and mentor them and direct them towards the right way. But at the same time, I think it's parents' responsibility as well. Because nowadays, what I've seen, especially within our community, is that they feel safe, they think, okay, that their children are safe 10 o'clock at night in their bedroom than being outside in the streets. Whereas I have told many parents that they may be more safer out in the street at 10 o'clock at night than being in their bedroom at 10 o'clock if they're online, because you don't know who they're interacting with.
Well, I'm here with Zainab, Sheila and Abdul. And we've just finished the session at the Glasgow City Hall. I just want to talk to you, please, about what you thought about the conversation that we had today.
I think it was a really reflecting conversation because all young people were heard and all their points were heard and reflected back to, so it's kind of important.
It's really difficult to try and get people to listen to young people's voices, so I think it's amazing that everyone actually took the time to come out and allow us to put our questions forward, and I think, you know, it is empowering for these young people when they realize that people are willing to listen to them, then they will speak up. You know, I definitely believe that there will be a change following this discussion.
So that report put together by Nazir Afzal should say the views he expresses are not those of the BBC, but interesting views, in particular from that young man, Rehan Ahmed Raza, who talked about the need for re-education rather than punishment, for help for those radicalised rather than punishment. It was interesting as well, that comment at the end there where somebody said children are safer out in the streets than they are in the bedroom because of the access to the internet. When we were in Dewsbury a few weeks ago, 4-5 Live, on the way back, I might have told this story before, but it's very relevant, met the taxi driver who picked me up was a gentleman from Savile Town who said that he was so alarmed by what was happening to young people that, unbeknownst to them, he and his wife had nicked their passports to make sure, just in case they were feeling suddenly radicalised, that they didn't bunk off. And of course, you know, there's some truth for you that probably parents don't know what teenagers are doing. They're no different from any other house. The teenagers have their own life, and often it's very separate, in particular with social media, from that of the parents.